Thanks for coming. I'm very happy to see so many people wanting to learn about more producing techniques. That's really, really good. My name is Stephane Assadourian. I'm a veteran of game development. I've been doing games for 20 years now. Is the sound okay? Yeah? Okay. I worked on Ubisoft's most established franchises like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry or For Honor. And now I'm a consultant, so I want to talk about a lot of production techniques that I think the industry is lacking, because what I see in my clients is, repetitive models and patterns that I think we can easily fix. So I want to introduce you to what I call a top-down rational approach, and let's start right now. So we make games to sell them. I mean, it's no secret by now. We always want to produce a game, and we always produce games inside a business context. And as producers, what I've noticed and what I've observed is that sometimes we kind of lose sight of the business objectives. And what I want to propose today is that by rationalizing our objective at each stage of the game development, I believe we can over-deliver. And that's what I want to talk about. So let's start with the business. There is some people who are really, really good at it, and it's not necessarily producers, but these people, they're looking for business opportunities. They're looking at the market, and they're really wondering, okay, there is maybe something that we can do. Also, it matches the portfolio if you're a publisher, and not only a developer, but it's about, can we seize this opportunity? Is there a target audience? Who are these people? Can we actually reach them? Can we sell to these people? And will we be successful? And all of these constraints, all of this context, is actually having a huge impact on the product to come, on whatever it is that you need to produce. And so the questions you have, of course, is, can we actually build this? Why wasn't it built before? Maybe it's too difficult. Who is going to build it? What kind of team do I need? And so on. It's endless. On the other side of the spectrum, for the product, you have the team. So who will build the product? What skills do we need? What should we work on in priority? How do we minimize the risk? And we're going to talk about that. Also very important, at this stage, there is no real product. You're just sorry. You're just trying to stand up from the competition, and as producer, you need a lot of information from the context. So essentially, here my point is, the product is kind of being trapped between business constraints and team's constraint. What can we achieve with the team that we have, and what is it that the business is asking of us? But really, at this stage, there is no product. It's like a tiny little idea. And your job is basically to grow this idea, to help grow this idea into a vision by building a team that will eventually build a product that will eventually be successful. So it's not just delivering on time and on budget, it's a lot more than that. All right, so what's a producer to do? So these are like basic phases of game development, you all know that. What you know is that pretty much each stage, your job is to deliver something. And in conception, you have to deliver the vision. In pre-production, a vertical slice. Whether you're independent or a publisher, it doesn't matter. You need to prove to the business people that you're actually working on the right product. And then, deliver the full scope, whether you're early access or not, doesn't matter, and then close the game. So I want to focus on these first stages, which I call the discovery phase. And I'm going to use Hearthstone as an example, because it's a simple game, everybody knows it. It's a simple game, obviously. And I think it's a good base to actually exemplify some of the techniques that I want to talk about. All right, so let's talk about the business. This is a process that I call cover to discover, and we'll go through it very quickly. So cover basically stands for business context. So is there a business opportunity? Like I said, like some people somewhere are actually telling you, like, yeah, this is the context you should operate on. This is your competition. From which we derive business objectives. So can we actually seize this opportunity? And then, the product vision, so what's the right product? So we don't work alone on that, obviously. And then, how do we evaluate the risks? So what are they, and what nature of risks do we have? So if we look at Hearthstone back in 2008, this was pretty much the business context they were in. Like, if we look at collectible card games, it's a huge market. There's only one game. So it really seems like an opportunity. And it's been 15 years already that Magic the Gathering is super successful. Yet, there is no software really stands out. Even the Magic software is not, so successful. But the game market is huge. Like the physical cards are the market. People are totally nerding on it. They want more cards, and it's been 15 years. So the success at this stage is unmistakable. But there's still no software. There's still no clear video game. So, Blizzard, they were looking at it, and they said, well, okay, maybe, there's no clear rival, maybe we can do something about this. So they kind of studied it, and, they decided that their business objective were really about providing a digital collectible card game experience to players. And by doing so, they had to think about new ways to draw in players. They had to think about, exploring platforms, exploring audiences, maybe a strong IP, no spoilers, maybe new mechanics, new controls, maybe, So they were looking at it. They understood the basic requirements for the success of Magic the Gathering, and they said, okay, it should be visually appealing, because the cards are really, really cool. And also the gameplay is complex, but it should remain deep. The problem is, it is complex, so we should make it accessible. And, the game should be played faster. So that's pretty much it. From the context, there are business objectives. And for the producer, I believe this is really important that you actually get acknowledged with that you understand what this is. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really difficult to organize the team to build a product that actually fulfills these objectives. So what I suggest here is what I call production mantras. And it's basically just a few sentences. It's very clear. That matches those business objectives, or that are conversions of that. So I took this from actual Hearthstone talk, so it's not from me. I never worked on Hearthstone, but basically what they decided at the time is we need immediate fun for the new player, which is something Magic was not doing at all. We need to allow non-competitive players to strive. Our games should play pretty fast. We want digital cards to feel real, and we want them to be valuable, because it's a collectible card game in a digital world. And also they added something that is slightly different, which is everyone is a designer, which I put in here because it's an excerpt from what they said. I think is really, really useful when you're building the team. Understanding, what kind of profile you want, whether you're an artist, a programmer, or a designer. They wanted people who actually can think in abstraction levels and who had kind of a technical brain like that. So business is not about features, it's about results. That means as producers, you don't need to tell your team what to do, you need to show them what to accomplish. And this is where the mantras are useful. So I suggest you display the business objectives for everyone to see in the room, in wherever you work, in your working space. And you have to remember that this project only exists because you need to satisfy these objectives. Yes, there is passion in what we do, but there's also a business behind it. And it's really, really important that we manage to match it. And, by working on iterations like that, our tiny idea starts to grow into a vision. Of course, there's a lot of back and forth, and I'm going to talk about that without any transition. So from the business to the product vision, what is the role of a producer in conception? Well, when you understand there is, a business context to everything you're doing, the role of a producer in conception starts to be slightly different. So we need to deliver the vision, but, what is the vision? We know the creative lead is in charge of connecting vision and business, and hopefully you saw the fantastic talk of Alexandre Mandrika yesterday about this, where he explains that, exactly how to do that, from the creative lead point of view. And from the producing point of view, we can ask ourselves, what is the vision, and why does it matter for the producer? So I'm going to simplify it here, but for me, I put these 8 items on the board. They're like, we need the fantasy, we need to understand what our USPs are, what our pillars are. We need character story, elements of player's experience, core gameplay loop, game structure, map. Basically, we're designing a world, but also a player experience, and we have pillars and USP. So out of these 8 items, I actually like to split them into two different sides. Some of them, all of these 8 items are business items. This is really important to understand. Like the story is a business item, the character is a business item. But if really we had to split them, I would really put the pillars and the USP on the business side, because they are the ones who connect the best with the business. And the 6 other are more like raising questions for the team. So on one side, what we have is elements of vision that actually provide answers for business, to connect to a specific audience. And on the other side, we have items who actually raise questions for the team. So remember, the product is trapped between the business and the team, and this is exactly how it happens. Now, as we iterate through the vision, as we raise questions for the team and they provide answer, we raise other questions for the team, which provide other answers. As we grow the visions like that, we have to make sure that we answer the business and that our USPs and pillars are the good ones. And as producer, you can actually challenge business people and say, look, this is what the team is coming up with, and we feel it's slightly different from what your analysis showed us, so what do we do with this? And so maybe your work is not good, or the team is not good enough, or the team's work as a whole is not good enough, and we are drifting away, but at least it's good that we know it, because it's still early. So let's look at Hearthstone. How does it exemplify itself in Hearthstone? So answers for business, questions for teams. One of the pillars that they have is a sense of feeling the digital cards, which is like a huge impact on the thing, and this is really how they can beat the competition. And on the team side, you can promote like how to build a gameplay prototype. So what they did is basically this. So this is taken from their own GDC talks. And on digital cards, what they did is they actually design mechanics that are actually really, really good for digital stuff, which you can't really play with when you're in the physical world. For example, have a 50 seconds timer to take your turn. When you're playing a game of Magic, you have to start your timer. It's like, yeah, it's 15 seconds, it's done. Or copy 2 cards from your deck. Like, how do you do that really in a physical world? So they used naturally digital stuff to make the cards feel real while being digital. So these features and these systems are actually really well matching and tying into the USPs and the pillars. On the other hand, building a gameplay prototype, it's no secret, that they started this with a Flash prototype where the team actually provided answers, and that's how they actually build the vision. So this is a really good example of how you should do it. Now, it raises questions for the team, and we are in full uncertainty. And so your problem is to maximize the team's output. Even if it's a small team, you need to understand how to get that vision as fast as possible. So first of all, everybody contributes to the vision. You need to facilitate communication, obviously, remove blockers for the team as we progress. Also monitor the vision progress, which is an interesting topic because you never know when the vision is finished. So how do you monitor the progress? How do you say stop? But you know how to do that because you need to challenge the vision, which is another entire chapter. Like, how do we challenge the vision? Well, my advice is to always rationalize with the audience in mind. So that means basically keeping the business into account. So who are we making this game for? What is the distribution of players? Like, how do we understand them? You must capture the business opportunity in that way. So every time people ask you about a feature or a new system, you must think about the players. You must think about the audience. And we get to that as well very soon in more detail. You should demand to your creative leads to have like explicit USPs, or to the business people, in fact. How do we differentiate ourselves? And also, to have branded pillars. So we find these 2 items as a really good way to filter in and filter out any proposal from the team, and also as a good interface to talk to business people. Now, if we look at the business in terms of phases, we basically have 3 phases. We go from a business opportunity, we craft a product with hard direction, tech pipeline, some game scope, and then we polish an experience and we release to market. But what's really interesting about this is to understand that out of these 3 phases, we have 2 types of scope. And we have the vertical slice scope here, and we have the game scope there. And the scope is a crucial thing. The scope is at the center of everything. So it's something that you should really, really pay attention to. It's the center of all dependencies, basically. So when the scope grows, the budget grows. The release date is pushed back. The team roster has to increase, probably. Your business objectives are challenged. It's really, really what makes everything work together. Controlling the scope prevents you from gigantic feature creeping, and I've seen this way too many times, where we start to invent new features because we think it's cool, but it's not matching the business, and why are we doing this? And your role is to actually be the referee there. It's the heart of what players will be able to experience. It's linked to the strategy of the product as well, whether you go early access or you want a simultaneous ship on consoles and PC, whether this bit of content or this system should actually be postponed to a DLC thing. And it forces you as well to organize the quantity of content, into what I call core systems. And then you can delegate the ownership of some of the core systems to the people who will build them. And when you do that, you already start to have an organization of the team that is efficient. So if we go to the vision part of the cover top-down approach, basically your role is to maintain the scope in a state that allows to fulfill the current business objectives and also remains feasible for the current team. So again, this idea that you're trapped between, this diagram, that you're trapped between, the business and the team. And this is essentially what you need to do. And the tool to do that is the scope, is to maintain the scope. Now, overscoping always happens, because I know some producers who actually watch movies on a Sunday, and when they come to the office on the Monday, they said, hey, I watched a movie yesterday, which is really bad, usually bad news for people, because they think, they want to make this because it looked cool in the movie or in another game they played, and that's not necessarily, what the business wants. So, but sometimes it is, so you need to rationalize it, So overscoping means gigantic feature creeping. As I said, you cannot ship on time, and you will have really big business issues. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. So challenging the scope is really a crucial tool for delivering. Now, when your new ideas come, you're providing answers to the business and you're raising questions for the team. When new ideas come, you have to switch your mindset into two things, because you have to be able to take into account the business aspect and the team aspect. So when the business is concerned, you really need to filter it and be, in a stubborn mindset, like almost intolerance. You cannot accept any kind of derivation or whatever. You cannot accept any difference of what you've been told. And on the other side, on the team aspect, you can be really flexible, because it's still pre-production, it's still conception, and you still have time to actually explore new ideas and discover new things. So this is really, really difficult to do, because you really have to split yourself in two and think, okay, this is really touching a USP, a pillar, this system is very sensitive. Should we actually do this, or should we not? So techniques for scope challenging, I want to express two of them. One of them is the business angle, the other one is the team's angle. So from the business angle, where you have to be stubborn, the only real question you have to ask yourself as new ideas come in is it what our audience wants? And there's a lot of different questions that you can ask yourself as producers, but even the quality of the content, is it going to change our target price? Because the business people are telling you this goes for $29.99, and if you look at the competition, they have a certain amount of content for this price. So you really need to make sure that you're going to encapsulate the right experience for the players that you're targeting. And also you can use your production mantras. So in our case, for Hearthstone, does it allow non-competitive players to strive? So that's like a good question for a producer of Hearthstone to ask themselves. Will this direction make the game immediately fun for players? Does it help make our cards feel real? Does it help make the game play fast? So this is like a package, if you want, driven by this very important question up there in color, to actually think of how to challenge the scope. Now you can use also the team aspect to challenge the scope. And, the real question is, can we actually build this? And it's essentially a question of ambition versus feasibility. So is it actually feasible for the current team? How could it fit in our current plan? Do I need to grow the team? How fast? Like recruiting an engine architect, it's not going to be over 2 months or overnight. And how important would we rate this system and features? And by doing this, you can really start to have a proper challenging and maintaining the scope, as I said, as compliant to the business as possible and as feasible for the team as possible. Now, I want to show you 3 crazy ideas that I have for Hearthstone, and I want you to have this sense of how we could challenge this as producers. This is actually something I give in workshops for producers. but I think it's interesting to put this in a lecture mode. So basically, this is what I presented you with. This is how we actually question the scope. Now let's look at crazy idea number one. What if we were to do a 5 versus 5 mode? You know, your producer, you played League of Legends, 5 versus 5, it's great. Hey, why don't we do that? You know, I heard that all the time in my career. So crazy ideas like that. And then suddenly, as a producer, you can ask yourself, is it really what our audience wants? Does it help the game, make the game play fast? Obviously not, because then you have to wait for 4 other people to play. So, you know, this is really how you can say, okay, this is not a good idea. Like even with experience, you have a sense of whether it's a good idea or not, but you can actually rationalize it, which really helps in negotiation with the business people, with the creative leads, with the team. Crazy idea number 2, not so crazy, an adventure system to introduce new card packs, which is what they did. But they did that after releasing the first product, and you know, as a package content later on. And if you look at the questions, you can actually see that this idea is good, and it actually helps us match the business. So that's why I put it out there. Now another crazy idea, which is totally crazy. What about, you know, we make a story mode with a 3D avatar doing missions in an open world? I mean, you know, it's Blizzard, they can do everything they want, they have World of Warcraft, but still. And this is more like something that you can rationalize on the team side, where you can say, can we actually build it? Do we really want to go from a top-down thing to, you know, a 3D world, you know, open world where we can actually have missions? Because it seems like immersive, but maybe it's not the best way to collect cards. So yeah, this is just an example on how you can do that. So once you have the vision, you need to enter pre-production and you need to shape the product, which is a very fragile building. So we have business objectives. As I said, we have some kind of scope now, some kind of game scope, as much as possible, if possible. And you know, we're entering pre-production, and I want to talk to you about deconstructing the vision into core systems. So why core systems? Well, first of all, because the game is a set of systems. The final product is going to be built by improving each of these systems, and it will help us organize the team. You know, so examples of systems are the fight system, dialogue system, economic system, and so on. Sound, physics, UI, those are not systems. They are like bits of technology that helps you build systems. So if we look at Hearthstone, we can have a list of core systems from the player perspective. Obviously, it's not the full list, but it's just an example to show you what kind of system they came up with. So you have the fight system, the deck building system, the buy card system, matchmaking, communication, adventure, idle system. And I want you to pay attention to the fact that each description, which is very, very high level, is actually starting with the word players. So players can fight and win-lose, players can manage custom decks, players can communicate with each other, they can play against other players. So this is really useful for you because it starts to shape the team that you probably will need in one way or another. Now the second step to this exercise is actually to create a detailed list of it. So you make a table with 2 columns, core system, description and features, and you start to describe what kind of high-level features you would need for these systems. And you don't have to do it yourself. You can ask your team. They are actually more specialized than you. They can help you doing that. But if we look at the fight, for instance, distribute cards. Obviously, that's a feature that we need. Draw, select, and play cards. Timer. But the timer is a good question. Do we need the timer? Probably yes, because we want to help the players play the game faster. So the timer is a good thing. Damage management, mana management. This is not game design yet. This is just high-level feature description. Later on down the line, a game designer will have to decide, how do we handle mana management? And because the business tells you we want to make the game accessible, they will probably come up with a very simple rule that says every turn you get +1 mana, because everybody can understand that. And that's how we align the production, constructing the product with the business aspects. So you do all that, and then you can form categories of core systems. So again, a very rough example, but 4 categories: backend, gameplay with fight system, idle system, communication systems, card collection, deck building, buy cards, and the mission system maybe. So adventure rewards, adventure progress, and what they call the daily missions. This ties in really well into what I would call the mission category. And so if we go back with this list to building the product, we need to minimize the risks, and we will need to analyze the risks and their nature. And so I want to talk about two very important risks that we usually face when we enter into pre-production. One of them is really like a time bomb, and it will impact the team's velocity. It's very important that you actually see them in advance, and it's what I call the core system dependencies. Each of these systems here, out of those categories of system, are actually dependent. And so one of the dependencies is obvious here. It's like purchase card has a back-end aspect to it, and also a front-end aspect to it, where as a player you want to experience the I want to buy cards kind of action. So if you don't see these dependencies, it's a big problem because it's going to slow you down. Because if you only see the buy card aspect on the logic side at the game level, you think you're done in your milestone, you think you're getting there, but at the end of the day, when it's about, when it's time to actually launch the feature, you cannot actually purchase card because the financial aspect has not been handled by the backend. So, I mean, this is really obvious what I'm saying, but I want to show you that the dependencies are everywhere. And it's not the case of Hearthstone only, it's the case for every game that we're making. And so your job as a producer is to really analyze that and make sure that you get rid of those. Once you have analyzed that, you have to pick, which one do we do first? So I suggest you go with the highest risk first, because it's always complex for the team, and it's really endangering your delivery. Up to what point do we do that? When should we stop? When is it good enough? Well, it's good enough when we feel confident that it is de-risked, that it's not a problem anymore, that we will deliver it. And who will work on it? How do we organize the team? And some people can be bottlenecks, and that could be a problem, for instance. So the super programmer who can do everything, but the problem is only one, and you need to work on all of these systems. Same thing for artists, same thing for designers. So yeah, avoid bottlenecks. So you need to think ahead about the skills that you will need and what kind of people you will need. And then you can rank the systems, and again having the business objective in mind. So here, this is my own version of it, but priority number one will probably involve the fight and buy cards. Why? Because buy cards is kind of risky, because I analyze the dependencies. And fight because if there is no fight, there is no game in Hearthstone. So it's kind of core of the game. So we need to start with that. Deck building and matchmaking coming next, because we want to have players collect card games and also be able to play against each other. Idle communication, I don't really care. It's not really a risk. And adventure, they decided, to put it later. You could decide to actually start with adventure, and that would be a totally different game. It would be probably a game that doesn't work as well, because the adventure is really about having player experience a story, which is extremely different from playing a game of cards. All right, another risk that I want to talk to you about, and it's the top risk that I see, and I don't understand why this is a risk, in fact, because it's so simple to do. And I can tell you that absolutely none of my clients have actually done that right. And it's really a surprise for me. The only thing is it requires the producer to have an understanding of what the project needs. Really what I see is that if you cannot draw this, your organization is really, really sub-efficient. And what I'm talking about is organograms. It's very, very simple stuff. And it's just a way for you to present the team, even for newcomers to the team, this is where you are. And this is really helpful. Like if I join a team and I'm like a game designer or an FX artist, I want to know what I'm working on. What is my scope? What am I going to do? And what is the game? Also, if you notice, these teams are actually the systems that we need, that we analyzed before. And this is how we organize the team, according to this. And this is super efficient because we analyze the dependencies, maybe we sit, the backend team and the gameplay team next to each other, because we know they will need to communicate because of the dependencies. So this is one example. Of course, you can draw any kind of organogram. The idea is that you understand how to lay out the work and how to shape your team so that they are the most efficient, as efficient as possible. So I wanna go with the takeaways. What we learn. I wanna take the time to actually for questions as well. But I wanna talk about how you must feel comfortable with uncertainty. And the reason for that, for me, is very simple. Is that you have to organize a team of people who have themselves to feel comfortable with uncertainty. So if you don't feel comfortable with uncertainty as a producer, it's going to be very, very complicated to actually deliver proper management of people who should be comfortable with uncertainty. The cover to discover process, top-down rational approach, going from a context to objectives, helping on the product vision, rationalizing, how to accept new systems and new features, and also evaluating the risks, two of which I mentioned in this presentation. The pillars and USPs must connect with the right audience. Again, I refer you to the talk of Alexandre Mandrika yesterday. It will be on YouTube, I think, very soon. He explains how to do that from the creative side, and this is really for you producers, how to use this thing to actually help challenge the vision and the scope. Another thing, I said it before in a previous talk that I did in Poznan last year and in Moscow as well for White Knight, but you need a vision to execute. You cannot execute without a vision. And I see too many projects go into pre-production and even to production while their concept is not fully formed. Don't do that, really, never. And as a producer, it's your responsibility as well to know how to say no and when to say no to these kind of things, which ties in really well with the next one, which is, validation gates at each stage. The reason for that is because you need the support through the uncertainty. And these gates are not here to actually make your life difficult. They're here to help you. They're here to help you validate, that you really nailed the vision, that it's good enough, and that you can get into pre-production. And by assessing the risks as well at each gate, you can say, okay, this is where we're weak. This is where we need to improve on the pre-production. Or plainly say, this is not good enough. We should go back to the drawing board because we are not matching our pillars. Our pillars are not matching the business objective enough. So maybe we should not be doing this game. That's also an outcome that you have to take into account. And so to finish, what makes a pro producer for me is someone who is able to lead your team to build a product that best fulfills your business objective. And it's really, really hard to comprehend that a lot of people in the industry now really think that producing a team is delivering on time and on budget. Yes, it is, but not only. It's also matching the business objective and understanding the business context in which you're going to release this product. Dziękuję bardzo. So if you want the slides, you can go on my website. You can drop me a line. They will be available. Send me an email, and I think the talk will be available as well soonish.
Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
Absolutely, yeah.
If there are any questions, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
It was really inspiring. You mentioned about asking what our players want during this road on validating the ideas. I know sometimes it's
sorry?
About what players want. Do our players actually really want this?
Yeah.
And I was wondering what tools you would recommend and you find efficient from your experience, how to answer this question.
Sure. So it's not necessarily the responsibility of the producer, but it's important that you get educated on that. One of the tools that I like is the Quantum Foundry tool. They interviewed a lot of people on what games they like, and it's actually really, really precise. So this helps you understand, what kind of player like what kind of, not features, but whether they like destruction, whether they like creativity, whether they like design, whether they like, it's like the battle thing, kind of. It's a bit different. And they interviewed a lot of people, like hundreds of thousands of players. And this database is actually quite good. I think it's really, really helpful. So I suggest you look into that. Also, you ask the business people in your company environment, and they should have a lot of tools to actually help you understand who is the target audience for this kind of competitive landscape. And so if you're working on a simulation game, for instance, I don't know, what are the products that are really important around you, and how are you going to be different by making the product that you intend to make, and who are these people who play these kind of games? And then trying to find the opportunity on, how do we beat the competition while keeping this core market intact? This is exactly the process that Blizzard uses. There is EverQuest, they look at it, it's 400,000 players, and suddenly they think, we can do better. We can actually open it to a lot more people. We can make it more accessible. And then they create World of Warcraft in 2004, and it takes up to 12 million. So, and then it's the same thing for everything they did. This is basically their core business. So,
anyone more? Okay, so once more, thanks very much.
Thank you.